Hello everyone, so let's get started with project 4. To look at the instructions for the project, I'm going to share my desktop. So the project that we're talking about, there's only one project in module 2 of the class, and it's right here on the assignment sheet. And so it says that the location for that project is in Module 2 Assignments and Exam folder, and then the folder for Project 4. So I'm going to scroll down, and there's the Module 2 Assignments and Exam folder. I'm going to click into that, scroll down, and there's the folder for Project 4. So I'm clicking into there. And you can see, as with all the projects, the things that you need to understand to do the project are right here under the readings category. So make sure if you have things that you're needing to look up that you check out these linked items. And we have talked about most of them. We still have one thing that we need to talk about as far as input, and I'll just talk about that as we're doing this project. So this video is going to get you started with the project and leave just a little bit of it for you to do. So with all the projects, the first place to look is right here in the Getting Started section. So it says create a project for folder somewhere on your flash drive or computer, and then create a Python file named with retail cost, a dash, and your last name .py. And of course, your last name is your real last name. So in this case, mine will be Clifton. So my project name would be retail cost clifton.py. So let's get started with that. I'm gonna go to my desktop, and I've got a folder for week 3, and I'm gonna create a folder in there just like it says. Gonna create a folder named project 4, and that's where we'll save the retail cost with your last name.py file. So I'm going to start up Tawny and get going with that. So here's Tawny. To save our empty Python file into the project 4 folder, we'll just go up to File, come down to Save As, and I put it on my desktop in this week 3 folder, and there's the project 4 folder, and in this box at the top right here I'll just type retail cost clifton.py. Remember, yours should have your last name there where I have it highlighted. So I'm going to say OK, and we can check our work now. The bar at the top of Tawny now has the location of the project and the project name. This tab also has the name of the project, so you can double check your work. Now, all the programs that you write in this class, the very top thing in each file for the program are a series of comments, and the comments, I don't believe in this project, are provided for you. So you need to make your own comments, and the comments, as we've talked about with the other projects, you can use them as a model, but the comments are going to need to have the name of the project, and then a description of the project. So I just wrote out a little description there. And then, of course, you're going to need also to include the date that it was written. And you might want to, you know, you might want to put some dashes in here just to separate it or something. So that's at a minimum what you would have at the top of the project. So I've got those comments done, and they're always at the top of your code. They're required. You'll lose 10 points if you don't have comments at the top of your code. I can save this just to make sure that it's saved. You notice the little asterisk went away. It says that we don't have any unsaved changes. Okay, so let's take a look at the instructions here. And it says, if we get down here to the Stepwise Refinement, it says, implement the program as suggested in the getting the numbers and the creating the functions section. So I'm going to go back to Tawny, and I'll go up here. And here's the section on getting the numbers. And so we can take this code right here, just drag across it, and right click, copy it to the clipboard, switch back to Tawny, come underneath our comments here, move things around. So come underneath our comments, click, right click, and paste. And let's see if I can, maybe I didn't get that copied. I'm going to have to go back and copy it again. So right click, copy. Now let's try that paste again. Okay, so that pasted in. Now, one thing that you have to be careful of with Python when you're pasting code off the internet, Python lives off of indentation. And you notice when I pasted this in that it messed up the indentation because this def is not all the way to the left. So I'm going to have to go through here, and on each line I'm going to have to fix it so that it's indented one tab. I'm just hitting the backspace and making sure that I have my indentation right, because you will get an error if you don't have this indented just right. So I'm backspacing to get each line over to the left and then tabbing once so that everything that's part of my main function is indented with one tab. So hitting the tab key to indent. So I've just fixed the main function. Now, from the literals and the variables lecture, we talked about functions in both of those lectures. You should remember this is the definition. This is the signature line, the function signature for the main function. The main function. And that's just giving a name to these lines of code. So right now, this is not going to run because I think I missed copying something, and what I did is I didn't copy the call to main. So what's going on right now with our program, if I save it, let me save this. Okay, it's saved. If I hit run right now, you will notice that it doesn't do anything. Nothing happened, did it? Nothing happened at all. Okay? So, we have a function that we created, and believe it or not, Python is looking at this code, and it is actually okay with all this code. It's like we have this recipe for how to bake cookies, but we have never actually mixed up the ingredients and baked it. So we have the instructions for doing a function named main, but we've never told Python to actually run these. So when you want to no longer have your code be part of this function, you have to outdent. That's why indentation is so important. So if I'm sitting here indented right here underneath my main function definition, okay, and I want to actually write some code that's not part of the main function, I have to backspace so that I'm outdented all the way to the left. And now I can tell Python I want to run the main function. And this is the way you tell Python to run a function. This is what's known as a function call. This line of code right here that has the name of the function and the two parentheses tells Python to go find a function named main and run it. So, if I save this now and I run this, you will see the first thing that it's going to do is this line of code right here. And this is the function that we haven't talked about yet. We haven't talked about what the input function does. The input function in Python causes Python to write out, to essentially print whatever's inside the input function's parentheses. So when it hits this line right here, it's going to print down below here in the shell window. It's going to print enter the wholesale cost, numbers and decimal only. And it's going to be sitting down here waiting on me to type something in the shell window. When I type something in, the input function is going to return a string. It doesn't matter if I type numbers in, the input function always returns a string. So this equal sign right here is going to take whatever comes back, whatever is typed in, is going to be assigned. Remember, the equal is the assignment operator. It's going to take whatever we typed in, the string for that, and it's going to put that string into a new variable that's named string underscore wholesale. Okay? So that's what happens there. The next line is, you can see I've got a comment in here. It says convert the string into a float value and store it in a variable named wholesale. So here, this line, whatever you type in comes in as a string, something with quotes around it. Okay? If we want to do math on it, we have to change it into a number. That's what this float function does. In the literals lecture, we talked about the int function. The int function takes a string in and it converts it into an integer. The float function takes a string in, something that has quotes around it, because that's what comes back from the input function. The float function takes this string in and it converts it into a float, a number with decimals. Remember, the equals says take whatever's on my right hand side, stuff it into whatever's on my left. So when this line runs, wholesale is a variable. It's going to have a number with decimals in it that we can use. These next two lines just print that out. So let's run this program now and see what it does when we run it. Like I said, it's sitting on this line right here, waiting on me to type something in the shell window down here. So if I type in 35.12, okay, and I hit enter, this line ran. It took the 3512 with quotes around it. It changed it into a number. It put that number with decimals into this variable named wholesale. And then down here, this print statement printed out a string literal right here, what we have in quotes. It printed out that string literal. It printed a space. That's what the comma gets you, is a space. It also separates two things that are not the same. Okay? And then it printed out the number that was stored in wholesale. Okay? And this just skipped a line. So you can see right now we have a main function that's working, that's getting one number. We have a function call that tells the Python to go run the main function. So at this point, we've got everything working up to that point. Okay, right here's our code. So I'm gonna go down and it says right here, implement the program as suggested in the getting the numbers. That's what we just did. And the creating a function sections. So we have not done the creating the function section yet. So right here, creating a function to calculate retail cost. Okay. Now, in the literals and variables lectures, I talked to you about how Python is an interpreted language. Python translates the code one line at a time. And so if you want to be able to run the retail cost function, you have to define it first. Okay? So here it says create a retail cost function. Okay? The def says Python, I want to create a function. Retail cost is going to be the name of the function. And if you remember from the literals and the variables lectures, whatever we put inside the parentheses of our function signature line, whatever we put inside the parentheses when we're defining the function, this is what's known as a formal parameter. That's going to become a variable. So I'm going to copy this code, right click, copy. Okay, going to go back to Tawny, and if I want to be able to call that retail cost function from inside of my main function, it's going to have to be defined somewhere above where it's called. So I just pasted it in, and like I said, if you get code off the internet or copy code from someplace else, you've got to fix the indentation usually. So I hit backspace and then I tabbed. So this is now my retail cost function. So I'm going to save this. And so we've got everything done here. As it says right here what I was telling you about putting the retail cost function above the start of the main function. Okay, so we've done that. So we have got this much done of our program. We've done step 1 in the stepwise refinement. Next, it says modify the main function so that your retail cost program asks for the markup percentage that's needed. Okay, the markup percentage that's needed. So if we go down and look, here's a sample of that program running. And you can see right now we've got these first 2 lines done. So we need to write an input statement that does this line and captures the markup percentage. So I'm going to try to get my windows where I can see my Tawny editor as well as the Blackboard window so that we know what to type in here. Okay, so I've got this where I can see it. So we have already done this. We've already done that. Okay, and we've skipped a line. That's what this is doing right here, this print. So we need to capture the markup percentage. And does it say what that markup percentage is supposed to be stored in? It doesn't really give us a name, but you can see here they use string underscore wholesale. So I'm just going to follow that pattern, and I'm going to say string underscore markup equals. And now let's get back to that picture that was showing us how it was what it was supposed to say. And so input is the name of our input function. Notice I went ahead and put the beginning and the ending parentheses so I didn't have to remember that. Remember what goes inside there is a string, something in quotes. Okay. Enter the markup percentage, comma, I.E. 20% is entered as 0.2. Okay. I'll put a space in there. So next we're going to print it back to kind of confirm what they had just entered in. So I'm still indented in my main. So here I'm going to print. Oh, actually I've got to change. If I'm following the pattern that we had here, I've got to change this string into a float number. So markup equals float string markup. This line is going to change the string that we typed in for the markup percentage into a number with decimals on it. It's going to get assigned to the variable markup. So now that I've got that done, I can then print out the markup that just confirming you entered a markup. I'm going off of this right here. You entered a markup percentage of Remember, this is a string literal right here. I'm going to put a comma, and I'm going to put markup. Okay? So this is the code that we have written. Let's try running it now. There's my shell window. You can see, let's see, let me get my shell window a little bit bigger. Right here is where we are running it this time. This is from the previous time. So right here I can type in 3512. The next thing it should do is print out the 3512, and then after that it's asking me to enter the markup percentage. And so if I entered in a 0.5, okay, it comes back and it says you entered a markup percentage of 0.5. So we've got all that working. So now that we have it, capturing the markup percentage, it says modify the retail cost function so that it defines a second formal parameter for the markup percentage, and it correctly returns the retail cost instead of just returning 0. So this is the point where I leave the rest of the project for you to write and finish. But you've got a good start on it. Where you will be is right up here, okay? And remember, this is a formal parameter that's going to capture the whatever is passed to the retail cost function when it's called. Now we're not calling the retail cost function at all right now. So you've got to write the code to finish the formal parameters up here. You've got to write the code that goes inside of this function, and you've got to have that function return that retail cost. Once you've done that, then you'll have a call to the retail cost function somewhere right here. And then you can either do it all on one line or you could do it on two separate lines, but you will need to print out the result. And if you look at the example of what the program was doing when it ran, okay, if we typed in $10 for the wholesale cost and we said we were going to mark it up 50%, then once this calculation is done, our retail cost that's getting printed out is going to be $15. And so it gives you I think it gives you this pseudocode for it. Yeah, the calculation will be some form of retail cost equals the wholesale cost multiplied by 1 plus the markup percentage. So this stuff that's in bold is going to be the code that you write inside the retail cost function up here. Now, remember, when you get ready to call that retail cost function, you're going to be passing two things to it. The wholesale cost, or it's called just wholesale, down here in main, right there. Wholesale, the number, wholesale. You're going to pass the markup to it. So you're going to have two things inside those parentheses of our retail cost function. Now, what we down here, when we call that function inside of main, These are called arguments. And these names down here really have nothing to do with the names that go up here. These are called formal parameters when we're defining our function. Formal parameters. These are just placeholders that catch whatever was passed to it when we call that function. Okay, so the rest of the retail cost function is left for you to write. We have done a whole lot of it right now. Remember, the things to keep in mind is make sure you put the comments at the top. Remember that indentation here is really, really important in Python. Remember that you have to call the main function if you want the code to actually run. Otherwise, nothing happens. Okay? And remember that somewhere where we've got this comment here that says call the retail cost function, you're going to have to call the retail cost function similar to what I did here with main, except you're going to have some things inside those parentheses. So, good luck with Project 4. You've got a good start on it right now, and have a good week.